Hi, I'm Kate Childs from FMCG Institute. Welcome to our series, Window on Notable Careers. I'm joined today by Sam Mostapha, Sales Director of Red Bull Australia and Senior Fellow of the FMCG Institute. Sam is a shrewd and energetic FMCG executive at the top of his game in an intensely competitive category. His career progress at Kellogg and Red Bull evidence his success as a commercial strategist and team leader, and his exceptional ability to engage effectively with demanding retail partners. So, welcome, Sam. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for the opportunity.
So that was just a brief introduction to you. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, or something you think I've missed there?
No, I think it's an accurate summary, Kate. I've spent 23 years now in the FMCG industry in Australia. Predominantly my time has been working for Red Bull, but I did spend some time earlier at Kellogg's, where I learnt a lot of my early FMCG sales skills. And so my experiences have been very much across those two companies. But having dealt with just about all customers and even distributors in the Australian landscape, it's given me quite a good perspective on the way the shopper and consumer behaves across a multitude of channels.
So, which of your early roles, mentors, or training do you think contributed to developing your career to this point?
Oh, look, that's an interesting question, Kate. I think perhaps the best way for me to answer it is maybe in two ways. So, of course, being a sales director, my roots have always been in sales. So, I always took a lot of my mentoring from the earlier years. And actually, I have to highlight probably two training programs for me stand out. And within one of those training programs was a clear mentor. Look, the first one was a program that was run by a company I think called Strategic Horizons, but the guy who ran that program was an ex-Coles buyer of 10 plus years. And the first thing he taught me was to see things from the other side, or from a retailer's perspective. And then more recently, we have an Austrian gentleman by the name of Johannes Linzbickler who runs a brilliant in-house training program geared around joint value creation when we're negotiating with our customers, but also selling a lot of the programs. And this has been rolled out to all of our salespeople at Red Bull. And the beauty of both of these programs is it's confronting because they're all filmed and you can see yourself in action. And actually, they both come from a perspective of the supplier and the retailer. And so I probably would highlight those two in terms of my selling capabilities. I think the second part here is leadership. And I think this really is something that you develop as you continue on your journey in FMCG. I have to say there isn't a training course that has really defined who I am as a leader. Rather, I've taken a lot of learnings from experiences, people that I've learned from or trust quite a bit. I've tried not to model myself on one particular person, but I've tried to take a lot of the positives and learn from a lot of the, dare I say, negatives from some of the leaders I've seen across all of my experiences. And actually, I've taken some leadership lessons from even some of our trading partners. So we've all been in those tough, high-pressure negotiation situations, and you sometimes look back and think, actually, I could have learned something from that retailer. So you learn from the good, you learn from the tough moments as well. And I have to say that in the current environment the world is going through, self-isolation, businesses closing, this is really going to test the strength of us as leaders across not just FMCG, but I think across all walks of life. So the speed and pace at which things move and the fact that you need to be agile is already the lessons that I'm taking from what we've experienced.
And what do you think, you've talked about leaders there, what do you think great leaders should be doing right now?
I think great leaders right now should be first and foremost communicating. I think with so much uncertainty and so much unknown, really strong leaders need to, if I can say it, over communicate. And the difficulty is we're not face to face. So we need to make sure that if we're asking our people to work from home, whether they be in field or whether they be in the office, that we set them up with the right environment so they can have a productive day, and so we can also communicate with them effectively. And so, programs like Microsoft Teams and Google Zoom, the one we're using now, they become even more important. And just making sure people have the basics, a chair, the right screen, the right procedures, get dressed for work, make sure you get yourself into that work mindset. So communicating with them about how they should be working, but also what's happening in an uncertain world. So keeping them updated with government updates and what it means for their lives so they can also plan. And then the third part is just making sure that the business continues to run as best as possible. There's a lot of discussion, for example, in our business right now about what the recovery period looks like, and there's a lot of planning now about how we now go to market in these times where we all know it's not going to last forever. Yeah. And so we're planning on what a great recovery will look like. So, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I think everyone's got their phases, their 3 or 4 phase approach. And so, I think that's important because we will come out the other end with positives. But I think the only other part is we need to be agile and we need to knock back one scenario because we're not 100% sure of what that scenario will look like. So agility is important. Kate, the most important thing as well in relation to leadership now with COVID-19 very much upon us is it's the safety of our people. It really is. So all decisions really should flow from that. We need to make sure that we keep our people safe, just as we are keeping our families safe. I think once we make those decisions around our people, then we can make decisions around how best to run our businesses.
What's been the biggest epiphany in your career that shaped your approach to the roles you've held?
It's a good question, Kate. I think as a salesman coming through in my early career as, sales rep and an analyst and going through lots of different parts of sales, I think all those natural skills I've been quite good at, category management principles, selling skills. Personally, I've always had a growth mindset and a strong work ethic, and I'd like to push myself. But I think the biggest revelation for me is actually becoming a leader of people. And so, when you become a sales director, yes, you're very good at selling, but you have to start managing and leading people. And, dare I say it, at that early time, you get exposed to general management responsibilities. Mm. So I really subscribe to, the famous quote from Peter Drucker that culture eats strategy for breakfast, because it really is true. So building high performing teams, keeping your teams performing at a high level and then maintaining that is a challenge, I think, for a lot of us as leaders. So, setting a purpose, creating a mission, finding the right balance around how you manage individuals in teams, and coaching, they're all keys to great leadership. So you've got to dedicate the time towards doing that, and you also can't take your eye off the ball when it comes to big strategic topics that involve the consumer or the shopper or the customer. So for me it was around learning quickly how to manage a big group of people.
And looking at your career in total to this point, what would you count as your proudest achievements?
Oh yes, that's another good one. I think the one that sticks out the most is actually when I was first hired at Red Bull. It was more than 10 years ago now, but it was quite a different challenge. The challenge I had was to build a completely new grocery sales team. I was the first person hired. The brand was being taken back from a pretty large beverage distributor at the time. And I walked into a $200 million business without virtually a person, a system, process, and my task was to build it really quick. So really quickly I had to set up trading terms and contracts, processes, systems integrations, hiring of people, including field team staff. So it was quite a challenge actually at the time. And on top of that, I was asked to do it in 6 months. So,
wow.
And so, doing all of that, 70 plus people, I think is what I hired in that short time. And actually afterwards, it was quite nice, even within the first 2 years, to get some accolades from some customers around being nominated for some awards. and making some sort of an impact. So, and even more pleasing was the fact that some of the people I hired all those years ago, they're still with me in the company, and the ones that aren't have gone on to greener pastures. Some of them are overseas, some of them are other companies in bigger roles. So I think that one moment for me really did help me understand what it felt like to build something new and create a sales team from scratch.
Yeah, so in doing something, such a big task in such a short amount of time, you must have made some mistakes. So what are some of those mistakes and what did you learn from them?
Oh, I think I keep making them, Kate. So yes, I made some mistakes along the way. I think, yeah. Look, to be fair, with a short space of time, we didn't hire the exact right people. And so we had some churn in the early days. So the importance for me was perhaps giving myself a bit more time to hire the right people. There was processes that perhaps I could have taken a quicker learning from in terms of what the company had set up from overseas. And so, yeah, it was, learning the balance of the speed of decision making and, going live. I think it was the 1st of January 2009 that we had to go live. But I made some, and there's a couple I've highlighted. And to be fair, I still make them and I still learn from the mistakes, and I try to minimize them. But that's part of being a leader as well, is you're not perfect and you do learn from them. And I think the humbleness to accept as a leader you've made a mistake every now and again, and to share your allowable weaknesses also makes you a stronger leader as well, and gives you that authenticity of leadership.
Absolutely. What do you see as the most critical success factors for FMCG companies in 2020 and beyond?
Look, it's changing, Kate. It's a very good question again. I mean, and I really think with COVID-19, it's going to change even more rapidly. So what we're experiencing in the last 4 weeks is going to really test us again, as I said earlier. I think understanding the retail environment, the changing consumer habits, and then reacting to those in the right way at the right time. The world is changing, and so a couple of thoughts I had on the critical success factors for me. I mean, one, e-commerce and omnichannel. I know it gets spoken a lot in forums and institutes and across trade partners and industries, but it really now is super critical. I mean, people have probably across the developed world at least have probably ordered something online a lot more frequently than they may have in the previous 12 months, so the last 4 weeks versus the previous 12 months. And I really do think now the e-commerce and the omni-channel situation just gets moved too early, 2 years earlier. And so where we kind of said it might be 10 or 15% of total purchases in 2023, it's probably now 2022 or 2021. So, and the consumer mindset is really shifting towards that. I mean, you take Generation Z right now, who are completely digitally wired. It's known now in Australia, for example, they're not going into a supermarket. They're more than happy to buy their purchases of, not just their shoes or their clothing or their fashion, but their goods as well. I think the second one is, the role of brands, and having sold strong brands for, the majority of my career, and how we coexist against private label becomes important as well. And the reason is, that generation I spoke about really is looking for brands that have a clear purpose. What does a brand stand for? And the brand can stand for something, but the product then has to deliver against that brand. So managing that in a world where that's the expectation of a Gen Z is important. I think if brands can't get that message across and the product doesn't deliver to that message, then I think some brands will struggle.
Is there a hope or ambition you have for the industry that you'd love to see materialise, if you could set politics and economics aside?
Look, yes, I think the industry has made, I just talked the last 10 years, there's been tremendous inroads around, suppliers understanding retailers' needs a lot more, and probably vice versa. But I still think, I think in the industry there's a lot of conflicting interests, and, this this buzzword of collaboration across the industry now is, it's still there, and if anything, it's stronger than ever. I think things like, when I read across all the things that come my way, Nielsen in Australia, for example, currently saying that $11 billion of promotional spend is wasted. The conversations I've had, it kind of tells me that we'd probably all sell the same amount of product and wouldn't have needed to discount as much if we all collaborated a little bit more. So I think that's probably one example of where retailers and suppliers could collaborate a little bit more. I think in the industry as well, you've got, e-commerce again. There's this conversation at the moment around this last mile and who pays for the last component of delivering straight to a consumer's household. The emergence of the aggregators, Uber Eats. There's different operations across the world, but they'll only get stronger. I'm not sure we've worked out exactly who pays what in the value chain. So the consumer is wanting the product a lot more, conveniently, or as Woolworths say, ultra conveniently. So, working out exactly that new value chain, if I could say, is important, because the consumer's demanding it, and I think the industry is not giving it to them as fast as what the consumer's asking for it. And I think the third part, which again, coming from an Australian standpoint, is really important, is and I think you mentioned, political landscape, but sustainability and the importance of dealing with climate change. So, I'm more than happy to share my political view on it. I think that we're not doing enough, both from a sustainability point of view and addressing a lot of the changing climate increases in temperature, for example. So, I think FMCG has a responsibility to really lead in this example. You take sustainability and just the plastics and the aluminium and the glass and the cardboard that we produce, we need to lead. And so, setting ambitious targets is something that we as leaders need to start considering. And, dare I say, as an industry, setting our own carbon emission targets, it's not out of the question if you think of what we need to be doing to address those two key things. And I think, we'll move from from Generation Z now to, I think the next one's Alpha, and they're only going to ask for more of that. They're going to ask for greater initiatives, increased targets, and we need to be ready. So, I mean, that's kind of me just spitballing in a sense around what I think the industry is faced with. And I think the best of us will be ready for it a bit quicker than the others.
Yeah, you mentioned collaboration. I think to achieve all of those things, collaboration between retailers and manufacturers is so important. You're probably aware Charles Davidson does quite a lot of work on effectively engaging with customers. But I'm always struck by how much difficulty trading partners have in engaging constructively. Why do you think that is? And what do you think we can do to improve that?
Yes, I think it probably comes back to the fact that, I think collaboration, comes with, here's another word, trust. And, if we still don't have, truly collaborative shared goals and targets, we have joint plans in relation to what we want from categories, etc. But I still think, we're individual organisations, and I think individual organisations will always prioritise what those needs are. From a retailer and supplier's point of view, it's probably going to be in a profit sense. But if I bring back again sustainability, and a lot of the global CEOs at the moment now elevating this sense of sustainability up into a level of being as important as profitability as the number one priority for organisations. I think the more we can actually add to this shared goals and targets from an industry sense, but even from a supplier retailer sense, the more we could probably make inroads when it comes to collaboration. And I think it's a slow burn. I don't think we can solve the problems overnight. I think I take a lot of positives over the last 10 years where there is a lot more collaboration now than there was, in the previous decade. And I think the more learnings we can take from that, and the more we can trust each other to achieve a lot of these shared goals, I think the greater we can collaborate.
So finally, do you have any advice to younger executives who might be looking at you and seeing, you've got a really successful career? How can they manage their own careers in our industry?
Yeah, we need the young people to come through FMCG. So I think my words of advice to all the young people is, look, before even FMCG, I think the most important thing is to find your purpose. If you find your purpose, then it'll be strongly linked to what you love doing. I think once you can work that out, once you find out what you love doing, and hopefully that's career in FMCG, then your job becomes a passion. And once you can determine that, then you can set goals and set targets. And without goals and targets, even from a career development perspective, then we kind of just may have we venture into the risk of just wandering and being pushed into careers or roles that we kind of didn't want. But so I think that's one, is finding your purpose and just working out what you love doing. Two is develop yourself. I think it really is our own individual responsibility to make sure that our development is on the right track. So, it's not, company does provide a lot of the framework and tools and training, but it's also our responsibility, even myself now, to self-develop and to understand where development needs are and ask for feedback, even if it's not in a formalized process. And I think, it's still then on top of that, the third key piece is, we need, be a good performer, be good at what you're doing, have a very strong work ethic. I think all those things become important. There's the mindset as well, that you need that growth mindset. Companies are looking for those that have a bolder way of thinking and can take a risk and then deliver upon that. So I think if I put all of those into the melting pot of what I've just said, is they're the things I'd share with a lot of the younger people who are looking to FMCG as an industry. It's a great industry. There's always exciting things happening. There's wonderful people within it. And so hopefully that helps.
Great advice. Sam Mostapha, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Kat.